Welcome to the Experience Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to feature my recent conversation with Sarah Costa. Sarah is a first-year student in our class of 2021, and she is also a mom. We recently sat down to talk a little bit more about her background, what led her to Darden, how she's juggled the demands of being a mom and the first-year curriculum here at Darden, as well as her advice for other parents who may be considering pursuing an MBA. So I think you're going to enjoy this conversation. Without further ado, here's my interview with Sarah Costa. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Brett.
All right, I'm so excited for this conversation. We've had the Darden Partners Association on here before. We talked about life as a partner. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about life as a parent. Before we get there, though, I want to talk a little bit more about your background and what led you to business school. As we were talking before we got started here in the studio, these are some of my favorite parts of the conversation because I think they only further debunk the idea that you have to have a particular kind of background for business school. So who are you and what do you do?
I'm a first year, but before this, I was in nonprofit management, and specifically, I was a public library director in Vermont, where I had this amazing opportunity to take the reins of a nonprofit in crisis and really turn it around and learn by doing how to manage people, budgets, stakeholders. And I learned that I loved it and really needed to formalize that and find a way where I could have impact beyond just the local social sector. So business school was a great fit for me.
So when you told people, you're there working with the library in Vermont, you told people that you were thinking about an MBA, what was the reaction?
I didn't tell many people, I'm going to be honest. My board, when I did tell them, were incredibly supportive. There were a few MBAs on my board that thought it was a great idea for me, and they were happily my cheerleaders going forward. That's
awesome to have that validation. And so talked a little bit about your undergraduate background. I also think that's interesting to hear.
I went to Chicago undergrad and was a religious studies major, really looking at history of religion. But I like to joke. I was there around the same time Richard Thaler was doing all of his research into behavioral economics and this groundbreaking idea that maybe people don't always make rational decisions based on their best interest. And I was really doing the same research, but through a religious studies lens.
So you're in Vermont thinking about an MBA. What ultimately leads you to Darden?
Yeah, well, I'm here because I'm a parent, right? I'm here at this podcast because I'm a parent. And so making a decision to go back to grad school when you have other people who are relying on you was a very weighty decision. And I knew that I wouldn't do it unless I was confident there would be a good return on investment from it. So I was really looking at career prospects as one of the main decision-making criteria, but there are still two others that really factored in. I wanted a great academic experience because I'm a bit of a nerd, and I wanted to actually learn this material in a way that I could retain and use it later on, and I wanted a great community of people around me.
And so did you visit Charlottesville before you made your decision?
I did, and it was a very nice visit. I came for Darden Days in April.
I would imagine the weather a little bit better than Vermont?
I remember coming for my interview at about this time last year, and I left 12 feet of snow piled outside my house, and I came here, and it was 65 degrees, and the trees were blooming, which I was assured was not normal, but it was still a very compelling reason to come south.
It's funny. One of my colleagues has been having some conversations with some of your classmates as to why they chose Darden, and you'd be surprised the extent to which weather comes up as and then there was also the fact that it was kind of temperate here and, it's not too harsh.
It was a bonus. I wouldn't say it was a decision-making criteria, but it was a great bonus.
So you visited, for Darden Days in April, and you mentioned that there were criteria that you had. As you were thinking about sort of your family and moving to Charlottesville, how did you involve them in the decision?
They were incredibly supportive all throughout this. My husband was one of my strongest cheerleaders just to get me to think about business school, and then supporting me throughout this process going forward. It was a tough decision. Any parent will tell you that it is a lot easier to be a parent when you have other family around you, and we don't have family here. So this was definitely a tough thing to move so far away from our entire network, but it was still the right decision for all of us.
So as you were thinking about coming to Charlottesville, I imagine we have some people who are listening to this podcast who are parents or perhaps parents-to-be and sort of wondering about resources here. How did you do your research? How did you figure out what life might be like for you and your family here?
I talked with a lot of students. I talked with the one mom at Darden who is now a second year. I talked with a few dads. Got all the information I could about what made Darden possible for them as parents and as students, and really tested that against what I knew was feasible for us and what kind of balance we need in our lives, and decided that we could make it work.
So I'm curious about some of that advice, because that's really, I think, the stuff, and some of that may be even generally applicable, I would imagine, but some of it is probably quite specific to the parent experience.
Yeah. So I definitely get a lot of amazed classmates coming up and saying, I don't know how you do this as a parent. And I joke that it's sleep deprivation, and that's only partly true. Because you allocate your time differently. It's true that you have this other thing that you have to schedule into your life, but you never stop being a parent. So that obligation, that responsibility, and that mindset is also always there. It's not like you get to just spend 5 hours or 12 hours or however many hours a day it is with this thing. It's always there. And so, one, I'm allocating my time differently in terms of knowing I have 45 hours a week of childcare, plus I have maybe 10 or 11 hours when they're both asleep. And so that's when I try to fit all of my work in. And beyond that, any hours I have to spend beyond that time is something that I'm going to be taking away from potential family time, or I'm going to be paying for extra childcare, something like that. But it makes you so much more efficient with what you spend your time doing. And it makes you live more fully in each moment, so that when I'm with my family, I'm really with my family. And when I'm doing school stuff, I am really focused on school.
So I am a big believer that tasks tend to conform to the time that's allotted to them. So it sounds like you may be living a little bit of that.
Absolutely. Yes.
So you have the amount of time to study that you have to study, and it's got to work.
It has to work.
So what you just said, I have the good fortune of working with our executive MBA students and hearing about their experience and how they're doing all the things that they're doing in addition to school. And something that you just said aligns very much with what they say, is like, when I'm with my family, I'm focused on being with my family. And when I'm doing school, I'm focused on school. They preach this sort of gospel of presence.
Yes.
And in sort of full investment in whatever it is you're doing, giving those people that thing your full attention.
Absolutely. And I think another really critical piece to being successful as a student parent is clear communication with all of the people in your life around what those expectations are going to be. So you are going to be fully present for the time that you've allotted to something, but you need to be very clear in communicating what those expectations are going to be ahead of time. So with my learning team, I knew that I wanted to be present for my kids' bedtimes. And so I knew that I needed to communicate that very clearly right at the start, so that we got off on the right foot in terms of expectations around presence. And then balanced my own needs with the needs of other people, which may not have been kids' bedtimes, but maybe it was a workout that they need to get in that was really important to them, or their bowling league. Now that bowling is starting with Darden Cup. And the same goes for conversations with your spouse or your partner about how present you'll be and when. So
did you find your learning team receptive to those conversations?
Yeah. We have a great learning team.
So we talked about learning teams quite a bit here on the podcast, but maybe at a sort of high level, talk about some of the backgrounds of the students on your learning team, or just who they are, because it's such an integral part of that first year experience as you navigate the core curriculum here.
Sure. We have a perfect, diverse snapshot of Darden in my learning team. We have someone who was in hospitality and is moving to marketing. We have someone who was in finance and is moving to consulting. We have someone who was a sailor on major shipping vessels. We have an accountant. We have a banker, and we've got a librarian. And a lawyer also, a joint JD MBA, who is also a parent. So he's very impressive as well. And we just set up a really good contract at the start. We're efficient, but we like each other, and we make space to get to know each other and value each other as human beings, as well as these partners in learning.
We had some of the student affairs folks here on the podcast talking a little bit about learning teams and how they help students establish those norms. And there are very important conversations that happen at the early stage of learning team formation about how you're going to engage with each other, what the schedule is going to be, what are the important priorities for each person on the team. As you know, they can be different, right? Somebody's workout, is incredibly important to them. Somebody else's, family situation obviously is important to them. So you have to navigate all of this.
And I think this Office of Student Affairs gave us great guidance in setting forth expectations when we didn't know what expectations we needed to set forth to be successful. So to some extent, it felt serendipitous, and yet I know that there was a design behind all of that in terms of creating a contract that would work for us and giving us opportunities to bond socially as well. And so it felt serendipitous that we worked so well together, and I know that there was a lot of thinking and planning that went behind that.
So let's talk a little bit more about your family's experience moving to Charlottesville.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, this is a little bit of the inspiration for this conversation. Also, your experience navigating Darden as a parent. But, you mentioned that you have 2 young children.
Yeah.
It's a new place for them. How did they feel about Charlottesville?
So far, they've loved it. I think they're confused about why winter isn't a thing, but they got 1 day of snow and they built a snowman and went sledding, and it worked. My son is at an incredible preschool that we love, and we are making it work because we also have an au pair who lives with us and is just absolutely a gem of a human being and makes so much of what I'm doing at Darden possible. But they really enjoy Charlottesville. It's a good city to be a kid in, honestly. There are a lot of fun resources, things to do. We had the good fortune of moving into Huntington Village, it feels a little bit like an expat community. But there are a lot of other parents with young kids around my kids' ages. And so we also just have regular play dates. And the moment we moved in, our kids had friends, which was incredibly valuable as they were going through all of these big transitions.
I imagine that was something that was probably on your mind as you thought about the move.
It was. We had so much on our minds, though, honestly. Mm-hmm. It was a great thing to have here already. But we chose to live in Huntington in part because we just knew that it would give us the most time back. Because we were weighing living off campus farther away and having a commute. And ultimately decided that looked like an hour a day that we wouldn't have with our family. So living close to campus made a lot more sense given how precious each of those hours is. And then when we got here and realized, because we didn't see our place before we moved in, we hadn't really, we didn't know what it was going to be like. So it was a great surprise to have all of these playmates built into where we were living.
One of the things we've talked about here on the podcast is that for first-year students in particular, given where most people live, Darden does kind of function like a residential program. Most people are living relatively close to grounds in a few apartment complexes.
Yes. It's a bit unusual. I do have several friends and classmates who do live off grounds. They definitely got a bit more space and a bit more modern living arrangements. And often people with families do choose to do that. But we've found it to be so valuable to be nearby.
So how about your husband? Imagine for him moving to Charlottesville. Talked about this a little bit on the Partners Association, DPA conversation about, moving to Charlottesville. If you had a career, sometimes people are able to stay engaged with their career, work remotely, that sort of thing, or find a job here. Sometimes it leaves them looking for a job here. What has his experience been?
He's had an interesting experience. We are both career switchers. He was a carpenter in Vermont, and now he is applying for med school and studying for the MCAT while working full-time at the hospital. So it was definitely challenging for him he just finished his master's sort of earning all the prerequisites for med school that he didn't get as a philosophy major in undergrad, because we were both very practical and career-focused in our choosing our majors. But we're just trading off who's the grad student and supporting each other through these transitions. And he's been very supportive. But at the same time, what I said about needing clear communication is very real, because the hours are few and you have to make the most of them.
So no small plans in your household between you going to business school and it sounds like maybe med school is on the horizon for your husband.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit more about the process of sort of navigating the first year as a parent, because the Darden first year, it's well documented that it is challenging. It is rigorous. There's a lot of reading, a lot of meetings, a lot of prep to be done. But you also have real demands on your time outside of the classroom. You talked about being efficient. Was there a learning curve with all of this?
There was, and I am a big advocate for Darden before Darden. That was a great sort of low-stakes boot camp to remember how to be a student, but also being a student at Darden is so unlike any other experience of being a student I've ever had. And so it was really just learning how to be at Darden and be present in the classroom and get the most out of this learning experience. So that was a wonderful training ground to make that transition. But yeah, there's a learning curve, definitely. And I remember Mark Lipson at the beginning of Darden Before Darden saying in our finance class, all of this feels like a foreign language right now, but you will become fluent in it. And by Q2, you will feel fluent in finance. And it's true. So that learning curve works. The learning experience works. It has exceeded all of my expectations.
What have been some of the highlights for you of your first year? I realize it's a profound time for folks, and we're going to talk a little bit about the career stuff in a second. But any highlights of the academic experience that stand out? Definitely,
I love my section. Section E is incredible, full of smart, talented people who are so giving of themselves and their insight. It's astonishing how close you can feel with 65 people, but the process worked, and I have learned so much from my classmates. Beyond that, our faculty are also incredible, and some of the things that I have learned the most in and enjoyed most were things that I never would have suspected, like decision analysis. I love decision analysis. It's like it gave me tools and a language to think about things that have always preoccupied me without having these tools to actually make sense of them. And then some of the more qualitative courses ended up being some of the most challenging in terms of the conversations that we would have and the learning that would occur. We had some really challenging leading organizations classes and conversations that really helped us grow as individuals and as a group together. And it's just been incredible. I've been very impressed by the Darden faculty.
That's great. The section identity is so compelling to me. Oh, yeah, I think Section E, this is just an anecdotal observation. Section E may be the most heavily represented section on the podcast. I think, in the roughly 50 or so episodes that we've done thus far, it feels like Section E is loud and proud here on these. So you're doing your part to contribute to that.
Excellent.
But there's such intentionality around the design, in particular of that first year experience you think about. We talked about your learning team and the sort of diverse composition. You have essentially a microcosm. Obviously, those of the sort of broader class, you have poets and quants to sort of borrow a little bit of business school parlance. Obviously, the people on your learning team are spread out across the section, so you kind of get the benefit of all of the different section discussions when you come back together after class and sort of debrief. But then you go to your section. Obviously, a huge source of identity for folks in the first year. Easy to get to know. You have all your core classes together. The faculty rotate and come to your classroom, which you own in a certain manner of speaking. Decorate it. It's been fun to be in the classrooms and sort of see as sort of the seasons pass or holidays are coming up, what people do with that. You have mascots. You have a color.
We do. Yes, our mascot is a banana.
And you have the Darden Cup going on in the background of all of this, which, as you mentioned bowling earlier.
Yes.
There's everything: soccer, cricket. There's been like a field day in the past.
There's a talent show coming up that we're banking a lot on for the talent shows.
I think Section E may have won the talent show.
Oh, it definitely won last year. They set the bar high.
I saw the video of that. The video doesn't come through on the podcast, but we'll say is super, super impressive.
Yes.
So obviously it sounds like a very rich, academic experience. So you've got family commitments, you've got school, and that leaves a really significant third item, which would be the job search, or at least the internship search in your first year. How was that, juggling all these other things, and also looking for an internship at the same time?
Not going to lie, it was intense. As I mentioned, I came to business school because I wanted to gain exposure to some other industries and find a way where I could have impact as a leader outside of just the social sector. And so I wasn't quite sure if consulting or general management would be the right path to go for that, and ended up recruiting along both paths to sort of test the waters of each. Ultimately, I ended up choosing a GM role at Vanguard with their MBA development program for the summer. I'm very excited about it, and I think it will strike the right balance that I need to feel like I'm succeeding both professionally and personally with my family.
That's great. And so here you are. We're getting there. It feels like the summer is closer maybe than it actually is. But your summer internship on the horizon. You are pretty seasoned as a first year student at this point. You also, one of the reasons why you ended up on this podcast is it's starting to sound like there is maybe some at least loose organization forming for parents who are navigating Darden and wanting to be helpful to incoming students, prospective students who are thinking about this experience, doing Darden as a parent.
There is. One of my classmates, Kat, has been really instrumental. She is the other mom of the first year class. There's two of us. And she's been instrumental in pushing getting some sort of parents organization together, because before this, a lot of those conversations were just referred out to the Darden Partners Association, which is a wonderful association, but definitely there's not perfect overlap in that Venn diagram of parents and partners. And the supports that students who are parents need are very different from the supports that parents who are partners need. And as I mentioned, part of what made the decision easier for me in going to Darden was that I was able to connect with all of these parents. We want to make that process of connection a bit easier for students coming in who may be becoming parents, may be thinking about becoming parents, may already be parents, just to make sure that they have connection to people who can really help guide them as they make this huge transition for not just them, but for all of the other people in their lives.
Well, one of the exciting things about this time of year for us as admissions professionals is we're starting to gear up for recruitment for next year. In addition to, which is weird to say, but we also have quite a few students who are focused on getting started at Darden in August, and so this is a really interesting intersection where we are talking to people who are sort of early planners and for sort of perhaps the 2021 cycle, but also people who are very much focused on I'm starting in 6 months and I'm trying to figure out what my life will be like. So what are some sort of pieces of advice or tips you might offer for parents who are listening to this podcast and thinking, well, I'm a parent and I'm thinking about doing Darden. I wonder what I need to know.
Figure out childcare early, have backups, and make sure it's something you feel really confident with so that you are not spending mental energy on that when you don't have time to. That is the single biggest key for success, is just having reliable, trustworthy childcare.
So how did you go about that research process?
For us, it was an au pair. We had au pairs before and had good and bad experiences with them, but we found one that we felt very good about, and it worked out really well. But we also knew that we wanted our son to be in a good preschool. And so we actually came down solo with 2 kids to find a place to live and to check out preschools, and visited a bunch of them, but found one that we really loved. That was a great fit for him. And so far, both of those solutions have worked out beautifully.
All right. So do your research early about childcare.
Yes.
Figure that out early. Any other tips or suggestions you might have?
Just make sure that you have time in your life to explore Charlottesville with your family, because it is a great place to be as a parent, as a kid. There are so many fun resources here. And that's been a key part of taking care of myself, is making sure that I have some time to really get out and be part of this great city with my kids.
Yeah, we do talk about the quality of life aspect here. I think oftentimes it gets sort of filtered in a lot of different ways. But if you're moving here with a family, though, I think obviously it's a great place to live. I think about a number of my colleagues, families, kids in school. Seems like a pretty easy place to live and to have a quality of life.
It is. And there are so many really fun memories that I know my kids will have from this, whether it was trick-or-treating on the lawn, going to Carter Mountain and getting donuts and listening to sunset concerts, hiking up Humpback together. There are great memories that I know that we are all making as a family here.
Yeah, and the thing about Charlottesville, I think, is nice. It has a very human scale to it, right? It's easy to figure out what there is to do. I mean, there's a lot to do, but when you're here at Darden, word travels fast, and also in the community generally, you sort of wrap your head around family-friendly activities pretty quickly, and it's accessible. It is,
and it's also a very supportive place for parents in general. Like, the culture is just supportive. I'm consistently amazed that the online mom groups for Charlottesville are super positive and they don't fall prey to the sort of nastiness that you often get on the internet communities among parents. It's just been a wonderful, supportive community overall.
That's great. So you're here on the sort of brink of your first elective period.
Yes.
Q4 students at the very end of the first year take a few electives. What are you planning to take?
I just finished getting my bidding all set up, so I'm hoping for Paths to Power with Peter Bellamy. And then I was trying to think about balancing sort of plans for next year and what I want for my internship and what I just want to know more about. So I'm going for valuation, going for managing international trade and investments, and financial reporting.
Wow. What a selection of classes.
Yeah.
So you seem like someone, though, that has a lot of passion for learning. I think it's certainly something that I've picked up on here on this conversation, or you think deeply about, being engaged academically. Is that how you describe yourself?
Yes, I definitely have a passion for learning. Yeah.
So do you still get I imagine being a former library director, you're a reader?
Not so much when I was a library director. There just isn't time. But, when I have time in my life, I'm a reader.
So I imagine it's mostly cases now?
It is mostly cases now. In the midst of recruiting, in a moment of weakness, I went to the Darden Library and picked up Thomas Piketty's Capital, because that just seemed like a therapeutic thing to do at the time. And honestly, it kind of was. But yes, I do. I love to have my mind occupied with a number of different inputs. And for the most part, cases are varied enough and challenging enough that I haven't needed to look for further reading. But I'm sure this summer we'll start picking up a few other things.
So any last pieces of advice or tips to prospective students who are listening to the podcast?
Feel free to reach out and connect with people, because everyone at Darden wants you to succeed, and we would love to make sure that you are connected with the resources you need to make the best decision and make sure that your family is supported in coming here if this is where you decide to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't underscore that enough. I think the community here, for all of our students, just how supportive they are of one another. I mean, that's something we think about from an admissions committee standpoint. We want people here who are not just bright and intellectually capable, but also who will be great teammates. And I'm glad to hear that that's coming through. And the great thing about also being an admissions person here is you have so many students who are willing to share their experience and offer sort of tips and suggestions. Makes admissions a lot easier. It
was definitely part of my decision-making criteria. I can't count the number of people who were willing to talk to me as an applicant and as an admitted student, and it was demonstrative of the culture at Darden overall.
Well, Sarah, it's been a pleasure spending time with you. I'm excited to hear about the potential for another student organization. Darden is well known for having a lot of student engagement. For our podcast listeners who are just starting to wrap your heads around extracurricular life here at the Darden School, the University of Virginia has a practice of student self-governance, meaning that students really direct the extracurricular life of the university, and Darden School obviously included in that. So there's over 50 student organizations. But you are right that we don't have a student organization that speaks directly to the parent, the Darden student parent experience in that way, or navigating Darden as a parent. And so it's exciting to hear that y'all are trying to get something together. At a minimum, so appreciative of your coming on here and sharing your tips and insights. I always learn a few things through these conversations. So thank you for making the time during what's obviously a very busy time in the first year curriculum.
Thank you for having me, Brett.
And that was my conversation with Sarah Costa, a first-year student in our class of 2021. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, thanks for listening.